What's up, everybody? It's Nikki. I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about what you should never say to a person who uses a wheelchair. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few things. So first and foremost, I want to thank you all for watching and liking and commenting on my videos. I love sharing content with you all, letting you in on my perspective on what it's like to be a person who uses a wheelchair, particularly in New York City. I'm noticing a lot of you that are watching my videos aren't subscribed, so I'm going to need you to do me a favor before we continue, and I'm going to need you to hit that subscribe button. It's free. You'll never miss a video, and if you really want, you can hit the notification bell. You get notified when I post a new video, so you never miss. Don't forget to like, comment, and share with somebody. Get you some tea, get you some snacks, and let's chat. Today, we're going to be talking about what you should never say to a person in a wheelchair. The reason why I'm going over these things is just to bring awareness. If you or somebody you know may have said these things, I don't want you to feel bad. I just want you to be a bit more mindful of the things you might say when you're engaging with somebody who's in a wheelchair, and maybe think twice about saying these things because they can impact the person negatively. Also, this is my perspective. This does not apply to all wheelchair users or all people who have disabilities. So other individuals may feel differently. If I have any wheelchair users or any individuals who have a disability who are watching my videos, please put your input down in the comments. I'd love to see what you feel shouldn't be said or what you may have experienced. And for my non-wheelchair users, what are some things that you wouldn't say that I may not have mentioned here? So the first thing I'm going to say that you should never say to a person in a wheelchair is going up to them and asking them what happened to them. I understand that we are curious, and this question most oftentimes is not meant with malice. It's just pure curiosity. Going up to a person and asking them what may have happened to them can be shocking to the person. It can be jarring to the person because they may not be comfortable to share what their circumstances might be or what their lived experiences that is the reason why they're using a wheelchair. And chances are, if you get to know somebody who uses a wheelchair, when that trust and that respect is built, chances are they'll share the reason why they use a wheelchair. Okay? Another thing that you shouldn't say to a person in a wheelchair is, do you have a license for that? I understand that a lot of times when wheelchair users show up in the world, again, wheelchair users and individuals who use mobility aids or have a disability are not what you would expect to see in the able-bodied world that we live in. So I understand that cracking a joke and saying something like, do you have a license for that, in jest may be a way of an able-bodied person's way of breaking the ice. But in my personal experience, I feel like that comment comes off as the impact of that comment is not a good feeling for myself, I would say. And particularly it's because a person who uses a wheelchair, more likely than not, has been doing it for a while, if not their whole life. And if somebody is using a wheelchair for a short term, chances are they're still figuring out how to use it, or they're practicing, or it's not something they may not be used to using. But either way, a wheelchair user has to use a lot of skill in navigating it, and using a wheelchair is often not a choice, not done by choice for wheelchair users. Like maybe getting a driver's license is. I understand in some areas of the country you need a driver's license, but a driver's license is not necessarily, a requirement, to accomplish everyday tasks like a wheelchair might be for a wheelchair user. So to say that to somebody can put them on guard, it can just be really offensive. Another thing you don't want to say to a wheelchair user is, watch out, don't run me over. And again, it goes along with, do you have a license for that? I understand that these things are, meant as jokes and meant in all in good fun, and that generally there is no malice with these comments, but again, the impact can be negative to the person you're directing it to. So to say that isn't very nice. And typically a person who uses a wheelchair is very aware of how they show up in space with regards to how large their wheelchair is, how much space they need to navigate any given area. They're aware of how to maneuver around people. And I won't say that wheelchair users don't necessarily run people over because it happens, or hit them by accident because it happens, but I think I can speak for myself of saying that I'm very conscious and aware of the people who are around me. Another thing you shouldn't say to a person in a wheelchair, and this example and the thing I'm speaking on is a little specific, and it relates to a experience that I had a little bit ago. And so I primarily ambulate with a manual wheelchair, and I do use what do I use? I use a power assist, but I use a smart drive, and what it does is it attached to my manual wheelchair, and I can turn it on and off. It helps me when I'm feeling a little extra tired. I don't have to exert so much energy using my arm, or it helps me to go up hills. I'll talk more about my experience using the smart drive in a later video, but during this particular time I was using the smart drive, and I was leaving a store, and somebody who worked in the store, I don't know if they were a manager or an employee, but I was leaving the store, and the employee ran up to me and was like, hey, I'll grab the door because you look like Hercules. I don't want you to break my door. And I understand this comment wasn't meant to be mean. It was meant to be funny. It was meant to make a connection. But it made me think about, the way wheelchair users may use their arms as legs, and have a lot of upper body strength. For me, myself personally, because I've used a manual wheelchair all my life, I have insane upper body strength, and my arms are a bit bigger than most because they have to house a lot of muscle to help me move, help me propel, and all of that. And I can equate my arms to an able-bodied person's legs. It is said that your legs are the most strongest part of your body. They help get you from place to place. They move you where you need to go. They stabilize you. And of course your core is really important too, and other muscles in your body. But your legs are really strong because they're literally your foundation. So if you can apply that to a wheelchair user, our arms are our foundation. They move us, they propel a wheelchair, and on any given day I have to, move my body weight, and I have to move the weight of the chair. I have to move anything that I'm carrying, like if I'm going shopping, the things that I'm buying, they hold weight. So essentially, aside from my body weight, I'm moving a lot more weight than if I was just, walking, or something like that. So my arms are really strong. So the term Hercules made me reflect, because now I embrace like my muscles and my broad shoulders and my strength and all of that. But it took me a while to be proud of that, to have such big arms and so much muscle and all of that. And in that moment, it like triggered a bit of an insecurity for me, because I'm like, do I really look like Hercules? Like, where did he get that from? I just was like, maybe you could just like say, let me hold the door for you, is what I said. I said, thank you. And I said, I know you're trying to be funny, but just be mindful of the things that you say, because you don't want to unintentionally hurt someone's feelings or trigger something for them. And that. Another thing is, you should never ask a wheelchair user if you can have a ride or sit on their lap. Like, these are very intimate, personal actions, and you don't know what past traumas the person may have, or what their lived experience is. So you never want to, those are really intimate, and you never want to invade a person's space like that. And I do want to stress that I'm speaking from examples from an acquaintance or a stranger perspective. I'm not speaking from a family member, a partner, significant other, friend, where that trust is built. That may be something that is allowable, but it really depends on the situation. From stranger or acquaintance situation, never ask or say these things to a wheelchair user should you encounter someone who uses a wheelchair. Another thing that I would say is to remember that the person who uses a wheelchair is a person first. Let me provide an example for you. In New York City, the first thing that I could think of that comes to my mind is in New York City, the public transportation system is accessible for wheelchairs. Like, we have a lot of work to do. Only 25% of the New York City subway station is accessible. Transit. I'm sorry. Where am I going with this? All right. Okay. So, all right. Let me start over. An example that I can think of that would help make my point understandable is, I think about my experience when I'm boarding a bus, right? So usually when I'm boarding a bus, depending on where the bus stop is, I usually wait at the front of the bus stop. Sometimes I wait at the back of the bus stop, but most of the times I wait at the front of the bus stop. And it's customary for a person who uses a wheelchair to board the bus first, because it allows for space to navigate, getting on the bus without people being in the way and risking running over people's feet or unintentionally like banging into people. But there are times when either the buses are crowded, or there's a lot of people waiting to get on the bus, or a bus driver pretends not to notice a person who uses a wheelchair attempting to board the bus. That's a story for a later time. Comment down below, let me know if that's something that you're interested in hearing. Maybe I could do a story time about my experiences riding the bus. But a lot of times able-bodied folks want to be supportive of a person who uses a wheelchair, and it is much appreciated. But a lot of times I hear people say like, oh, the wheelchair wants to board the bus. And I understand that New York City is fast-paced and you got to get your point across quick, because people don't have time here in New York City. But I just feel like it takes no time at all to just add two simple words, 2 or 3 depending. But it doesn't take much to say the person who uses a wheelchair needs to or would like to board the bus. You humanize the person. You acknowledge that they are a person first. They're not equated to their wheelchair. They're not just a wheelchair, and it just presents a level of respect, and you acknowledge the person first. Another thing I would say not to say to a person in a wheelchair is I'm sorry. And particularly, I just want to raise the question, when an able-bodied person or a person who doesn't use a wheelchair says this to a wheelchair user or a person with a disability, like, it's important to really think about what are you sorry for? Are you sorry because they use a wheelchair? Are you sorry because saying I'm sorry to a person who uses a wheelchair or a person who may have a disability kind of sends the message that you pity them, and we don't need your pity. And the circumstance for why we are in a wheelchair is not your fault, and therefore you have nothing to apologize for. Another thing that I would say you shouldn't say to a person in a wheelchair is, like, you go up to them and just be like, while we're doing everyday tasks, be like, oh, you're in school, or you travel, or you work, or you're alone, you don't have a home attendant, you do this by yourself. Yes, that is very condescending, and not a nice thing to say, because people who use wheelchairs and people who have disabilities, we can very much so work. We are very much so very intelligent, able to travel, able to do things alone. And those type of comments, in my opinion, tend to alienate and ostracize individuals who use wheelchairs or have a disability. So don't say those things. Don't say that to someone. And I also don't want to disregard wheelchair users or disabled folks who have, home attendants, aides of any kind, because that is valid as well. And I want to validate their experience, and that is completely fine. But I just want to highlight the fact that, everybody is different. And so to, predispose judgments and assumptions on a person who uses a wheelchair or a disabled individual is not the best thing to do. Another thing you probably shouldn't say to a person is a wheelchair, like, if you see them or they have a significant other, you should definitely not say, like, oh wow, like, you have a partner, you have a partner, that's awesome. Because people who use wheelchairs and people with disabilities are capable and do have very healthy and successful intimate relations. And oftentimes there are relationships with able-bodied folks. There are relationships where the individuals are identified as disabled or both use wheelchairs, but it's not uncommon to see a person who uses a wheelchair in a relationship. Another thing I would say not to say to a person in a wheelchair is what was the other thing? I forgot what was the other thing. I didn't even write this one down, and I just thought about it, and it left me. Okay, well, Maybe when I'm done recording this video, I'll think about it, and maybe I can post a part 2. I really want to remember. I'm over here like, I'll post a part 2, but I really want to remember what I said. Like, cause I was when I thought about it in my head, I was like, yeah, I can't forget to include that. And now I'm like, can't remember what it was that I was going to include. Oh, all right, I remember. Thank y'all for y'all patience. Okay, so another thing that you shouldn't say to a person who uses a wheelchair or is in a wheelchair, you shouldn't automatically offer help. You should ask the person if they would like some help and be open to them saying no. People who use wheelchairs, have figured out how to navigate an able-bodied world for the most part and have their own way of doing things that is easiest for them. And oftentimes, although the help is good intentioned, the interference of someone's help may make it more difficult for the person, and then they might be required to ask for help. So, if you think a person may need help, it doesn't hurt to ask. They may say yes and they may say no. And also, always be mindful too, if you see a person who uses a wheelchair looks like they need help and is incapable of asking for help, or it looks like it's an emergency, definitely do something. But read the situation. Like, a person who uses a wheelchair doesn't innately need help or automatically need help. So just respect the person's boundaries. While this video is primarily about what not to say to a person in a wheelchair, I do want to end it on a positive note, and I want to give you some things you can say to a person in a wheelchair. The first is, instead of cracking jokes about speeding tickets and licenses and being strong enough to break doors, or asking the person what happened to them, you can just say hi. We are not going to fight. We are not going to not say hi. We're just like everyone else. Sometimes we have good days where we want to say hi and be social. Other times we don't. But just coming up to someone who uses a wheelchair and saying hi can just go a really long way. You can say, can I or may I help you? That is okay to ask. Just be open to the person's response of saying no and ask before you help. It's also okay to say things like walk, run, stand when you're speaking to a person who uses a wheelchair. The only thing I would say is that if you're in a space where you have a person in your space, if you're an educator or a facilitator or something of that sort, and you have a person in your space who uses a wheelchair, you may want to use a more inclusive language. You may not want to say everyone stand and not acknowledge the person who uses a wheelchair that may not be able to stand. You can say something to the effect of, we are going to do an activity or something that is primarily done standing, but for those of you who may not be able to stand, feel free to do the activity or whatever it is to the best of your ability from where you sit. It welcomes the wheelchair user into the discussion. It makes them feel seen, heard, respected, and good. It's okay, because children are very curious. It is okay for you to say, my child has a question for you, but again, it's important that you allow the person who uses a wheelchair to not want to respond. It's okay to say excuse me. It's not offensive for you to say excuse me to a person who uses a wheelchair. Alright, like I said, for my fellow wheelchair users, If there are any things that I left out that you would like to share, I would welcome a discussion down in the comments. For my able-bodied folks or non-wheelchair users, was there anything that I mentioned that you may have said to someone in a wheelchair, or do you think there's anything that I forgot that you think should be included here? I want this to be a welcoming and open space. And again, this is not intended for anyone to feel bad if you or somebody you know may have said these things to someone who uses a wheelchair. This is all just meant to bring awareness. So again, I want to thank you for watching. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Turn on the notifications so you never miss a video. Make sure you hit the like button. If you like the video, leave a comment so I know what you thought. And share with someone you think may like the video. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and butterflies.